Hi, I'm Murray. You're on location with Murray and Jeff, the director behind the camera. We should face a camera on you. Anyways, our guest today is Eric McLean. This is our third episode, and we are grateful and stoked to hear Erica's story. She has quite the story. So she's going to dive right into it. If that's okay with you, can you dive right into your story?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Erica McLean, and I'm originally from the Gitxsan First Nation in Hazelton, BC, where I am a proud member of the Gittimax Band and the Gisgast clan, which means fireweed/killer whale is what we're known as. And I spent the first 19 years of my life in community. I feel like I have such a strong sense of identity and connection to those lands, which I'll talk a lot about today, because I feel like those pieces really they helped cement and create this foundation of who I am today. I think a lot about those times, even though it was kind of my first 19 years. And I moved to Prince George, the territory of the Lheidli-T'enneh, just about 20 years ago now. It's kind of funny, actually, like when I look back at it now. So I went to an alternate high school in Hazelton, and when I was about 16 or 17, I started to notice, I just had this very broad hope of I want to help people. It was just a very simple idea. I just want to help people. I realized that the community that I love, the people that I care about, my home really, we're struggling in just lots of different ways, which we know a lot of now, kind of the history and experiences and social landscapes of Indigenous communities. And ultimately, I landed here. I was accepted into a social service program at the College of New Caledonia, which kind of started this whole path. And it's just it's been an incredible experience. I love CNC, their model, kind of how they have created this little metropolis of learning in the north, and in lots of northern communities, which is really cool. So lots of love for them. Yes. And as I kind of developed on that path, I started to realize, it got a little bit clearer. So after spending a couple of years at CNC, I had, learned a little bit. I had done a few practicums in community. I had gotten a little bit more experience, which was terrifying, by the way, when you're first starting out as a young person.
What were some of the practicums?
So actually, my very first practicum was with the Salvation Army. And up until then, I had only ever worked in food service, so putting together food hampers, supporting clients, making conversations. It was scary. It was different. And we had some incredible instructors who just were there alongside the whole time. And I should note, this is really funny because it was really hard to move here. So for anyone who doesn't know, Prince George is less than 500 kilometers away from Hazelton, from the village of Hazelton. But to me, that was the other side of the world. My family loaded up my brother's pickup truck with a canopy, and that was all of my belongings, and then dropped me off here at my very first rental.
Wow, did you know anybody here?
No. And they dropped me off. We spent the weekend together. We did some grocery shopping, which included pizza pops and frozen fries and frozen pizzas and stuff like that. And we all cried in the driveway as they were leaving me, because it was such I was the first one to my brother, actually, I did have some family go away for a short while to attend college. But I was one of the youngest. I have another younger sibling, but it was a big deal. It was a big deal for me to stay here.
Good for you.
Well, actually, I shouldn't even say I moved away, because I went home every weekend for the first 2 or 3 months, really whenever I could. I would later learn how that is just such a common fixture in Indigenous communities, is that, it's not just leaving your family, it's leaving your home. It's very, very interconnected. Wow. And I really felt that. I look back at it now and kind of smile, because I'm wow. Yeah, that's what it is. That's community. So going back to my time in college, I transferred to the university once I had completed kind of my diploma experience. And then through that time, it was a very significant learning. I remember, like, you do, when you're doing your undergrad, you do a lot of presentations. And there was one significant one that I still think of to this day. And I actually share this story often. So I was presenting to my cohort, and I said, prevention, early intervention, I love that work. Like that's what I care about. And my instructor,
Prevention, early intervention.
which
Like that.
and just for background too, like in social work, in the world of social work, we are often intervening at like that crisis level. So very little of the work is actually prevention and early intervention, because it's often, you're supporting people when they need it the most, which is at a crisis. And I remember my instructor saying, "That's great. You know what you want to do, but you'll never work a day in your life." because
Funny, not funny. Yeah.
for that reason though, right?
Yeah.
For that reason, because that's not necessarily like the world. Most of the work is like here now in crisis,
Wow.
and that's okay. But it's just a funny story that I think of often. And after completing that degree program, which was like, wow, it was like my Everest. It was so exciting. And I started off into the world. I applied for lots of different positions that were out there.
After you finished your master's?
At my undergrad.
Your undergrad.
Yeah,
Okay.
my
Sorry to skip
undergrad
ahead.
social work. No, that's okay. Once I realized that I was getting out there and just kind of trying lots of different places. By that time, I had done a practicum with in public education, and loved that experience. So actually pursued work with the local school district, particularly in Indigenous education, and landed a position. I ended up in my first school that fall after graduating, and that kind of set off this like incredible trajectory that kind of like I feel like brought me to where I am today. And there's so much more in between, but I truly feel like between me hearing or realizing that I loved prevention and early intervention and then landing into education, I'm like, wow,
Seems like a good fit.
this is it.
I'd like to get more into the prevention and intervention. Is it physical activity and mind, body, spirit?
All the things. We'll talk about all of them.
Yay. Yay.
Yeah, so I got to education, and some of those positions, particularly like as an Indigenous education worker, it's a lot of that. It's very broad with kind of just these big common goals like build connections between families and schools, build connections between students and their community. All of these very broad ideas that were like, hey, you know what? You can make the work what you would like. If you can do those things while doing that work, like go for it.
Great.
So that would kind of set the stage for the next 10 years or so, which is very interesting for me because I really learned there was kind of this, and that was a very interesting time in education because we were shifting towards this new curriculum kind of around 2014, 2015, 16, and the BC curriculum incorporated more Indigenous education and more cultural teachings.
That's great.
So at the time, I went from being kind of a person who didn't necessarily feel comfortable or confident with cultural teachings, with, those parts. Like I knew a lot of those things because I grew up in community, but to one day be told, like, you're the expert is something total, like it was just such a paradigm shift for myself. And I can assume like a lot of Indigenous folks, but it really kind of set that stage for, wow, okay,
To be proud of.
we can really, yes, yeah, and we can really have like ownership over this and embark down this path of like learning and just embracing that all of this cultural knowledge that I have inherently is it's helpful, it's valued here, which was very exciting. And I did that work for probably 2 years. And then another opportunity came up. So having a social work background, there was actually other positions that were available, which was a community school coordinator, which was unheard of at the time. There was a very small amount of them in schools in our local community. I would say probably right now there may be 8 or 9 across many different high schools. There's usually one every school. But I decided to apply for this position. And that's where, again, that message, kind of that signal, make this what you will. Here are your big here are your big goals. Here are the targets that we're aiming for, even though they're not necessarily measurable. It's build connections, it's empower young people.
Community.
And the ways of which you get there, like, by all means. So I can share lots of different stories about how I kind of started down that path.
So you got that job. Yeah. Sounds like the perfect fit for you.
Oh, and there's this amazing group of people who kind of, supported me in coming into this world. And they're like, hey, here's what we've done so far. Here's what you can do. Make it your own.
It's amazing.
And I should share too, like, I have a mentor who is at this time was my very first principal, and still to this day is a mentor of mine. But again, constantly sharing, reaffirming that narrative that, like, you know what, you've got the tools, like, make it your own. So hearing that, having that support, it was like, I'm looking back now and I'm realizing, like, wow, okay, this is how I got here. It wasn't necessarily by anything that I've done, really. It's just having lots of, like, those little signals from community, from, important people along the way who are sharing that message, like, yeah, you could do this.
They believed in you and you believed in yourself, and you kept on going. Yeah.
So starting in that world, oh man, it was so much fun. Like, I look back at that now and it was so much fun. And actually I realize now, the work that I'm doing today in this broader context of building a brand, building a business, I still refer to those lessons that I had learned early on in that work of being a community school coordinator, of working in education, all of those things. So some of the things that we started with, I'll just share some of the programming that we worked on. And a lot of it was centered on leadership. Like, how can we support the leadership development of the young people in these schools? Because everyone has so much to offer, and they care. Like, there's, it's almost like this space where there's so much, like, talent, this pool of talent and creativity that is just completely, like, untapped because there's just finite pathways. It's like, honestly, I feel like that is much of our world, is that there's so much creativity and leadership capacity out there, but just finite ways of which we can actually, like, amplify it or share it. And that's kind of, I'll talk a lot about that today, because that's what,
please do.
Because that's a lot of, like, that's what I still believe in and I'm working on in my brand building. But I kind of looked at those young people of those days and were like, wow, like, you're so smart. Like, and so what that ended up looking like is, a lot of us, our schools would collaborate, we would train together, recognizing that, again, we had finite pathways for young people to practice wellness. So that could be like school sports. And those are great, but it just doesn't always fit for everyone. So there were other opportunities that I was encouraged by other community school coordinators who had come before me saying, what about the Iceman? Here's what we do. And so for anyone who doesn't know, the Prince George Iceman is this, like, amazing annual outdoor ice race where for young people, so for junior racers, it's a relay race of a team between, like, a cross-country ski, 2 5K runs, and a 3-kilometer outdoor skate, and then another third 5K run. And then it ends at our local aquatic center for, like, a 400-meter swim.
It ends on a swim?
Yeah. Yeah. in the middle of
Exhausting.
February, I might add. But because that wasn't like the traditional pathway for a young person to kind of explore their athletic capacity, rather, it was just kind of a way for people to move and practice wellness. The training that we did together, all of
Yeah,
those
creating
things.
that community too.
So it was really a lot of that work is just finding different pathways to bring out those opportunities for a broader range of student need because as we know, like the traditional school sports may not work for everyone, and that's okay, but here's another avenue. And I know, like, I'm certainly confident that schools are still doing that work in different ways now, like okay, well, if we don't want to play dodgeball today, let's go for a hike outside and just practicing like land connections. It's really cool to
Land connections. Ooh, I like that.
it's amazing to see like all of the different intentions in trying to create wellness opportunities. So I got to experience that a little bit. And for me, and I'll talk a lot about this in different ways because it's such a part of it was actually in those early days of my prevention and early intervention practice that I realized if a young person feels, or not even just a young person, anyone, if we can feel strong on the inside, then we can feel strong out there in the rest of the world, in the rest of our worlds. So what I mean by that is in that process of working in education, I did a lot of strength training. Strength training is such a significant part of who I am. It's a big part of like my daily and weekly practice.
Great.
So I would bring those opportunities in my work. I would bring them into different schools, particularly in high schools. And a sport that I care a lot about is Olympic weightlifting.
Nice.
And I thought, like, if I can give a young person a barbell, and if they can throw it around in a way that they never thought they could, and I say that like throwing it around, meaning like in a safe and efficient way that. With the proper training and support, that they can feel like I got to witness that, to see a person kind of light up when they master something like that. Doing something that they didn't think they could is incredible to witness.
I can imagine. And it makes you feel better. I used to Olympic lift when I was younger.
Oh, it's
That's
wonderful.
so good. Yeah.
And that's so through that process, like through training many, many young people over the years, I realized that if you can feel strong in here, you can feel strong out there in other parts of the world. Because at the same time, I was realizing that was what was happening internally for me as well. And a couple of there's so many different projects and programming that we would work on in education, and I think parts of that I want to highlight is like that storytelling. So giving space for young people to tell their story, to be leaders. I know I talked a lot about leadership development, and so sometimes that would be doing media interviews, bringing them to radio stations to tour and to say hello on the radio, like just recognizing that, what you do, what you say, or what you have to say is important and it's valued, and providing different spaces for that to happen. Getting to witness, how that impacts a person it was very incredible learning, and kind of helped create this foundation for the work that I'm doing today.
That's great.
So I spent, just about 10 years kind of doing that work, and with all different age groups in K to 12.
Sticking to your intention of helping people.
Yes, yeah. Which is so great that you say it that way, because I remember my mentor saying, like, it's not necessarily true that we like get smarter over the year or know more. It's just like it's that our voice becomes clearer. And that's exactly what happened. Is I realized, okay, so that goal or that vision started to become a little bit more clear. And towards the end of that 10-year mark, I was starting to feel those little signals that said, okay, this is good. This is great. But I want to do more. I want to reach more. I want to have a broader reach for people.
Good for you.
And that's when I slowly started to think that maybe perhaps I could shift and pivot away from education, which was really difficult because making so many beautiful connections. There are so many incredible educators out there that it was a very tough world to leave. And it was a very difficult decision, but also at the same time realizing that it was something that I needed to do.
You felt the pull?
Yeah. So once I talked to my family, once I had the support of my family, I kind of started talking to my education family and said, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is, I think it's time that I need to shift away. And that was happening at it was a very difficult time in education, I would say, for a lot of different reasons. But ultimately, that led to me having some conversations with people I care about also that same year, and deciding to run in the upcoming local municipal election.
Yeah.
So as I will always say, I care so much about education and the work that happens there. I truly feel like it is such an incredible place to address inequities across our social landscapes as a society. And it's such a beautiful place. And there's so many amazing educators who truly believe that and, care about doing that work every day. So I will endlessly be an advocate for education or a voice for education. I just simply decided that, okay, I want to do this. I'll do it. I will run for this position, this seat on the local school board.
In 2025?
In 2022.
Oh, okay. This is back then. Okay. Yeah.
So this is, yes, yeah. This was the eternal dialogue happening back then.
Okay.
And that was wow. What an experience, because I didn't realize, many occasions in my life, I thought I was putting myself out there. I thought that I was putting myself, I was being vulnerable as a leader. And then I chose to run in a municipal election. I'm like, wow, this is really scary. This is really scary. And scary meaning, because it was a new experience. And when politics are involved, there's, as is so much human emotion.
Oh, I can imagine.
And realizing that, navigating that, I have learned so many incredible lessons through the last 2 years. So now, as we're speaking, I'm halfway through my term. I am
Congrats.
thank you. It was a very incredible learning experience throughout the campaign, throughout these last 2 years. We've had so many challenges, but I can look back and I can feel very hopeful and very energized. Even my trustee work this week, I leave our meetings feeling so hopeful and energized just about the trajectory, the pathways in which we're going. There's incredible people leading out there.
You guys are making a difference.
There's so many good things happening.
Can we dive into a little bit how you got this position and what was the process? And
for the trustee work?
Yeah.
So the process, how I got this position. So I decided to run in 2022 in that municipal election, and there were a lot of candidates. So there were a lot of speaking events and opportunities, and particularly during that time, there was a lot of concern around, values of inclusion. How are you supporting these things? At least particularly in my conversations with candidates. And then our school district had, just not a great track record, not a great reputation at the time. And anyone who has read headlines in the last several years can understand that. So I think, it was a difficult time. And that's, it's been, those kinds of things happen. And
good time to come in and make a change.
Yeah, and with also honoring the work that has been done in the past as well, and recognizing that there is no especially now, like I can never look at the work of, how we got here, how we got to difficult times. There are no singular reasons. What I've really learned in these last 2 years is how important it is, how necessary it is to hold and to really cherish democracy. Because, and I say that because in my experience, we have a team of 7 people and we are a corporate board, meaning we have zero connection to, or, well, we have our governance role, and then our senior team handles the operations world. And that can be there can be many gray parts in that work. And it's very important for us to have that open dialogue and that trust to say, actually, I think this is an operational thing. I'm going to pass this along to staff, or, oh, this is a governance thing. So, I can support that conversation, and being able to have that trust and dialogue, and to be able to make it a safe space to say, actually, no, I don't think that's our work, or I don't think that's your work. But really, truly, just making it a safe space to be able to have difficult conversations. I am so our last public board meeting was very cool. I had heard from one voice particularly who said, I think that was our best demonstration of democracy.
Yes.
And I just thought, particularly for me, with my lens and looking out at the broader context of the state of politics today, it's very difficult. Maybe perhaps what we see in the news is different than what happens behind closed doors in other political spaces. But what we see certainly in the news is that it's unhealthy, that it's very negative, that it's very polarized, all kinds of things. With that learning, I realized, wow, it is so important to hold people and to hold these values and in this, this container of politics, recognizing that, we each have this very different intersection view of the world, and that's okay. And how do we hold people in that space and, maintain that respectful dialogue that, yes, yeah, absolutely, we cannot agree. We have very different values, and that's okay. And continue, but still continuing the work, still continuing the conversation, because we don't have the luxury of, shutting down and, just not working. That's not what our political world can be. We can't do that. It's not an option.
Yeah, wow, quite the story. I was like, how does she write a book and have a clothing brand as well and get a master's?
So I got, I completely skipped over the master's part. In my time in education, while I was doing that community school work, my mentor had said, this, if you want to achieve any next levels in this world, in this work, you're going to need that little M beside your name.
The master.
And I always think of that often because I never use the M. But I understand. I look back at my experience, and I am a lover and supporter of the University of Northern BC. I'm so grateful that I did all of my training and education here in the North, for that reason only, because I do feel like Northern communities have so much. There's so many opportunities. We often talk about this narrative that we don't have, nearly as much as urban centers, but we do have a lot that bigger centers don't, which is community, which is that opportunity to leverage relationships very quickly, and the ability to wear multiple hats and have these multiple layers of connections. I just think there's so much opportunity in the North, and
Agreed.
I think a lot of it just kind of hinges on shifting that narrative a little bit.
And more affordable compared to the lower mainland anyways.
Yes, exactly. It was such an amazing, it was a great experience, because I really and I feel like the team there at the time really supported me to go down, I want to call it a rabbit hole, but a little bit of a tangent on passion and just exploring passion in our work and how that how that lends itself to create really cool outcomes and really cool conversations. So actually I did my final exam and there was a lot of questions I feel like were just like created for me about passion and education, and how that can, because at the time I was also seeing teachers educators who were also creating really like amazing, thoughtful, innovative practices. And it was because they were so energized by it, because they were so passionate about it. So I really realized, like, if you have that space, if you have that support to really explore that creativity and innovation, like, wow, really amazing things could happen for people.
Sounds like you've been following your passion this whole time.
I've been very lucky. Yes. Nice. Yeah. I feel like
blessed and grateful.
If there's and people they lean into that story and understand and support it, which is really exciting.
That's great.
So I'm kind of I look back at all of these experiences and couldn't feel so much gratitude for all of the people who've kind of helped create that, particularly in the last, throughout the entire my entire journey, but of course through the last couple of years, because it's been a lot of me going down different pathways that just don't necessarily exist. And that's exciting. Like, it's
exploring new things.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah. Like, say, for example, so I was doing my trustee work, or am doing my trustee work. And, like I was saying, that time in education, I really just, I felt like I needed to do something a little bit more and, reach more people. And ultimately that led to me self-publishing my first book. And for a bit of context, I had been writing. So since my second child was born in 2017, so I had kind of that year of maternity leave. I had started a blog.
So you're raising a family too.
Yeah.
And a blog. And a book.
They inspire so much of everything. That's actually great. I often tell them that I wouldn't try as hard if I didn't have them. And at the time, so I had this year and I decided to start writing a blog. And that was kind of like my first little step, my first little experiment into...
What was it called?
It was called Scotty. Yes, okay. Which is the brand name. So actually, okay. I had a website, never developed this massive following or anything. I had maybe a few subscribers, but I just had this one goal, and that was to write every week, to publish every week. And I would write about a 500-word blog, lots of different things, lots of different topics. And I did that for 2 years, but that was the goal, was just to be consistent. It didn't matter where it went or how, what kind of reading or following I got. It was just do the work. And after 2 years, I kind of wrote a letter to all of my, I think, 8 or 10 subscribers and said, okay, so we're going to turn the lights off on this website for a little while until I figure out what's next. So it's all kind of coming together at this particular time around, 2020, 2021, 2022. And I'm starting to feel all of these signals and just kind of this natural movement towards something else. And like I mentioned, I've decided to move on from education and pursue something else. And in that year, I put together so many blog pieces that I was proud of, ideas that I really liked, and I put it together. And my goal was just to have 50,000 words. And I did, and it was terrible. It was so bad.
You're just so hard on yourself, I'm assuming.
It was so like it's just I was looking and I read it and I'm like, this is garbage. So
Yeah,
so
I don't believe that, but
so I spent a year kind of rewriting it. And that was the really like, oh man. And that was great. I'm so glad that I did that
wow.
because at the end of that year, I had my 50,000-ish words. And the book evolved into 3 parts: love, work, and grow. Never intended for it to happen that way, which is really
Love,
cool.
work, grow.
And I love sharing that because it wasn't necessarily how I didn't have a plan for what the book was going to be or what, like, I just knew that I needed to write it. And I knew that the title needed to be From the Res to the Mountaintop, Becoming
like
Who We're Meant to Be.
Okay.
And then beyond that, it was okay. Like I was going to figure it out. So I'm a big fan of, there's some great thinkers and writers out there who will say like, work backwards from magic. So I started with the end and then just kind of, played around with that writing, played around with those ideas.
Work backwards from magic. So
I
like
think
your
it was
ultimate goal
around.
and then you work back. Is that
Pardon me?
so like your ultimate vision and then you work back from that?
Yeah. So I knew the title. And that was it.
Okay. Just from the res to the mountaintops.
Yeah, becoming who we're meant to be.
I like that, and which you clearly are.
And it's so love. If I were doing a book signing right now, I always tell people, like, I didn't intend for that to happen. Love, meaning I had to learn to love the parts of myself that I wanted to hide from the world, that I used to be ashamed of. And once I learned how to do that, I realized I had to work really hard to become the person that I was meant to be. So part 2 is a lot of me looking in the mirror, realizing how I'm standing in my own way, which is really difficult. That's like heavy emotional lifting to do. So I commend people throughout that process. I honor the people who are doing the work,
the shadow work. In
reading that, when they're talking about and looking into that part 2 of the book. And then part 3, grow, I realized that once we get there, once we get to our mountaintop, it's not really, that's not it. Like life is just this continuous evolution of who we are. So that growing, that learning continues. And part 3 is a lot of those kinds of lessons, is that it just continuously moves. And
even when you're at the top.
Yeah. There will be another mountain. There will be other amazing learning. And that is the beautiful part. It's amazing. That is the necessary part of the journey.
And then you can keep helping people the higher you go.
Yes. Yeah.
As you know.
So once I self-published that book, I thought, oh, okay, we're done. This is awesome. But realizing like, wow.
Just the beginning.
Yeah, you actually have to, there's so much that goes into creating that base, creating that platform for writing. And I've had some amazing opportunities over the last couple of years since publishing it to be able to kind of share those ideas. And I'm still working on that. Like I'll continuously share those ideas, but I'll do like different speaking engagements with a lot of young people, youth in pre-employment programs, youth in community, and really just sharing those ideas about, appreciating the journeys, both celebrating your process, celebrating your effort, while also recognizing that, we have so much strength, we have so much capacity to continue, and being able to do those things and pursue those things is, necessary. It's difficult, but it's also very beautiful. Yeah.
Your story's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I'm looking forward to it. And now you have 2 more years as a trustee.
Yeah.
And will you have big plans for that? Obviously, you just want to keep on going.
I don't know. I haven't. I've spoken with a few folks in different spaces a little bit. I'm not sure if I would run again. I didn't intend on running for a second term, but I do believe in the, so a lot of this is voice, my work with building the Scotty brand, that's voice. Being able to serve on your local, in your local municipal politics, that's another opportunity to build voice. And really that's my hope. Like that's my intention, is that, you know, in 2024 beyond, there are other Indigenous people, Indigenous women, Indigenous people with children in the system. Like, I just want to make the space more inviting for someone like me to come
great.
behind. And I think that's a lot of what I think that's a lot of what my work centers on, whether it be the political pathway or my writing / brand building pathway, is that I recognize that I never felt confident in those spaces, or I never felt like I had enough of a voice to offer that space. But, you know, now that I've done some work, now that I've spent some time in those spaces, you know, I just want to make it like inviting and recognize, you know, communicate that with people that, hey, you belong here too. If you want to be here, there's space for you.
Once again, helping people. That's amazing. Can we talk a little bit more about this brand?
Yeah.
So this is the brand here. So Skahani.
Yeah, Scani Athletics. So the name actually came from, I was looking for inspiration. So as I mentioned, I was doing this blog work and I was looking for something in connection to my home territory. So I actually asked the designer to create something that looks like a mountain. So the reason why the logo looks like this is because I wanted it to look like a mountain with some water flowing underneath. And the actual big logo has some coastal form line, like a little bit of honoring of coastal form line in there, and creating this very simple, clean graphic. So it comes from the phrase Skanistni'i, which means on top of the mountain in the Gitxsan language. I had been looking for something something to connect to language and land from my home community, and landed on that. So actually Skani.com was in existence when I was writing this blog many years ago. And then I just kind of brought it back to life when I was ready to publish the book. And to share a little bit about the brand, I love writing. And publishing the book was probably one of the most meaningful experiences of my life, but also recognizing that not everybody loves nonfiction, but I also needed a way to share this messaging of self-mastery, this messaging of strong Indigenous voices.
Good.
And that's what, and I think I talked a lot about strength training, kind of that process of feeling strong. So athletics clothing is how it all came to be. It's another way for me to share that messaging.
It makes sense. I love it.
And like we've talked about so many times today, this is about people. Like, this is about supporting community. And if you check out the website, you'll see a Giving Forward program, some information about our Giving Forward program. So I had actually just reached out to our first leader. So we're going to give clothing sponsorship packages to young leaders and athletes out there who we think are just amazing and doing a lot of that work that we talk about in different ways. So I reached out to our first person. There's a little bit of their story will be on our website very shortly.
A local athlete?
Yes. Yeah, local young leader. And I already have several in mind who I want to support, and there's many. There's
That's great.
Hundreds.
Can you mention the first one? The name?
Sorry?
Can you mention who?
Yeah, absolutely. So River Harry is going to be our first sponsored young leader, and I've delivered their clothing package already. So they work in healthcare, which is how I met them, because I too, I also work in healthcare. And
you work in healthcare as well?
Yes. Yeah. And through that, just realized, being from a small community, River is an incredible young leader and lives so far away from their home community right now, and actually just started a weightlifting program.
Yes, River.
For some of the groups that they lead in that organization, which is really cool. So I'm super proud. I've known River's journey for a little while now, and I'm just very proud to support them and kind of have them be a part of this process.
That's great. So where's River from?
Oh, I can't remember the name specifically, but it's Alkali Lake. I can't remember the indigenous name.
Okay. Mm,
Yes, yeah, and kind of the Dog Creek First Nation
mm.
area. So past Williams Lake.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Nice.
There's many. I think there's almost a dozen First Nations kind of in that area, and now I'm forgetting. They just sent me all of the correct spelling and information and everything, but now it's just escaping me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we dive a little bit into growing up on the land and
Oh,
your
yes.
belief systems and sweat lodges or any of that?
Yeah.
I'd love that.
The most I would say, like, I just like kind of light up when I talk about this because um I think about, like, I love running, and particularly when I was like 16, 17, 18, 19. So before I had left the reserve. So growing up in Hazelton, you're kind of nestled in the Skeena Valley amongst these beautiful coastal mountains. And I can remember vividly running, going for, and 5 kilometers was probably my regular distance. So I would go for a run. I would put in the old iPod Shuffle headphones, and I would just like, it was like medicine. It was like meditation. I would run, on these beautiful gravel paths among, the bases of mountains, and I would just have this beautiful view. And it was just myself and my music. And it was actually those moments I look back to because I spent a lot of time thinking about writing scripts for movies and, ideas that I had. And I look back at that now and I realize, like, how meditative those experiences were. I actually started running when I was quite small and just loved kind of that medicinal, meditative response that I would get
Love
from
that too.
being out.
Yeah.
Just, smelling the rain, smelling the air, smelling the cedar, and just this beautiful environment where I could just, it was such medicine.
And thoughts just flow.
Yeah. 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 So I look back at those things and I realized today, like very recently, throughout all of this learning that I've done in my life, that's what my land connection is. And this is something that I really want other folks to know, is that we need to give ourselves permission to develop, land-based connections, however that looks for us. And the reason why I say that is because and I talk about this in the book a little bit. So our family grew up with, like, I would never say that I went without as a kid because my family cared so much about making sure my soccer fees, my basketball fees were paid, like all of those things. Like, I never felt like I went without, but we certainly didn't have money. Like, the unemployment rate in our community was so incredibly high. And but I look back at those times and I realize, like, how my cousins, my family, like my friends, we would all joke that we, weren't Indigenous enough because we didn't do the hunting, we didn't do the trapping, like all of those things that we think or have this picture of what it means to be Indigenous. And I realized through that that's, that can be harmful. Well, we thought it was a joke, like we would joke about these things, but it can be very harmful to feel like, and I think we often hear Indigenous people say that they're walking in two worlds. And I think that's because we sometimes don't feel that connection because we have this picture of what it means to be Indigenous. Like, you have to have a name, or you have to regularly attend your potlatches, and you have to be a hunter, you have to be a fisher, like, or you have to know how to bead, like, there's all kinds of perceptions of what we think it means. And those are absolutely, like, yes, those are being Indigenous too, but
Which still happens. Right?
yes, yeah,
Okay, great.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you have those connections, like, that's amazing, that's great. But we also need to give ourselves permission to develop those connections to our identity, to our lands, in a way that makes sense for us, in a way that's accessible for us. And I think that's just sometimes I feel like that's something we don't hear, particularly Indigenous young people, enough. And that can create a real struggle or a real challenge for identity. And I'm sharing that because it has taken me lots of work and lots of years to recognize that my land connections mean going for a run, mean going for a swim, being in water,
Yes.
being with people, like having meaningful, deep conversations. Those are very big parts of my Indigenous community, of my Indigenous identity. But it's taken me this long to give myself permission to call it that.
Yeah, that's great. Like I can relate with I was thinking about while you're talking because I live out in the bush and I live off grid,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, so sometimes I do feel the difference because you're out there and you're in nature, and I feel just grounded and amazing. And then sometimes when I'm in society or when I'm traveling in Vancouver or there's people everywhere, there's just I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it, but I do feel like I need a balance of the both.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just so key to be out on the land and going for walks. So I'm not much of a runner anymore because knee issues and stuff. I try to keep that to a minimum. The bouncing and the jumping and stuff.
It's hard on the body, isn't it? Yeah.
So walking for me, but walking and just even sounds like I'm a hippie, but I am a hippie. Just hugging trees and just being barefoot on the land.
Oh, it's amazing. Yes, yeah. What it can do.
Yeah.
I am so inspired by Ryan Holiday, who is a modern day Stoic philosopher, and reading some of his work. Again, it was giving myself permission. And so he wrote this amazing book called Stillness is the Key. And
Stillness is the key.
it was through a time, or it came to me, I was reading it during a time where I was feeling like that. I think just by nature, I'm a very anxious person. And how that would show up was like, kind of frantic, like, oh my gosh, I have all of these things to do. And I got the kids as well, like, just a very busy mind, which I think is a lot of us, like, in the world today.
Same.
Yeah, like, I think it's just a feature of our world, unfortunately. But it was coming. So, those lessons came at a time where I started to learn, okay, if I'm going to have a future in, creating my own pathways, of being an entrepreneur, all of these things, of being a leader in a broader capacity, I'm going to have to figure this part out. So as a lot of us may have to do when, you're kind of, your calendar gets full or your cup gets, it's overfilling with the stuff that you need to do and stuff like that. So it came at a time where I realized I have to give myself permission to turn off the phone or to go for a walk when I don't have time to
find that stillness,
spend time with family when I don't have time to, like, just. And I think it's kind of been a really important part of my learning in this process, is that if I, and I talk a lot about that in part 3 of the book, is that there's this one chapter that I really appreciate and I love sharing as well. Actually, 2 of my favorite chapters are in the part 3 of the book. And one of them is called Full Circle. I talk about going on a camping trip to my home community with my family. So my children are sleeping in the trailer nearby, and I'm sitting with my partner. We're around the fire having a drink, and it's just these beautiful, like, unspoiled stars, and the sky is so bright I can see the silhouette of the mountain. And it's just, I can't even describe the peace that I felt in that moment. But in that, I realized I grew up under these same stars, like, my whole life. I grew up, among these mountains, and I'm thinking, this is incredible. Like, this is it. This is what it means. Like, this is what it's all for. But I had, like, this kind of funny, because I said, well, I grew up here. Like, why didn't I appreciate this before?
You get more grateful with age.
Yes, totally. And that was my full circle moment, was realizing I had to go through all of those other things all of those other struggles and, you know, wins, all of it. I had to go through all of the things before I can appreciate that moment. So that's what I talk a lot about in part 3.
Full circle. I like it. I love it.
So I think now I'm kind of in this space where, and I think you'll kind of see the themes of our conversation today about supporting people, about leadership, and that's really where I'm at today. So after self-publishing the book, in that work, in writing it, I realized, you know, it's not necessarily just Indigenous people. There's, you know, all kinds of folks from all walks of life who struggle with or have struggled with finding their strength or their voice or their space in the world. So really that's ultimately why I wrote the book was, you know, not necessarily of here, follow me, follow my steps. Here's an exact plan. That's not what it is. And I'll never want it to be that for someone. Really, it's sharing my voice and my story in a way that brings people along and that hopefully helps create a space for them to consider their own strength, their own voice, and their own space. Because on that leadership development pathway, like we don't need leaders who look, behave, or share in a certain way. Rather, leadership is really taking the unique parts of ourselves, our strengths, and just sharing them in a way that makes space for other people to do the same, because we all need that.
It's amazing. It makes space and inspires them, gives them confidence they could do it too.
That's the hope. That's the intention. And so after writing this book, and creating this clothing brand, so I continue to share that story and share that voice in a way that hopefully invites people to come and join that conversation, whatever it looks like for them, and to maybe have that conversation with themselves. Very cool. My big plans for 2025 is to write an online self-paced course in leadership development. In some of my work in this last year, I have learned that there are lots of opportunities to learn about Indigenous history, about cultural safety. However, there's not necessarily a lot for Indigenous leadership or what that looks like, what that could look like. So my intention is to create kind of an online asynchronous self-paced course to...
Online asynchronous. Okay, I can't even wrap my head around that. But I gotta admit, I don't know what asynchronous means.
Oh, it just means like at your own time.
Oh,
like,
okay,
you know,
nice.
Yeah. Self-paced. I guess I said both. So
I like it. That's a big goal.
It's I think there's a lot of that. It's just taking the ideas that I've learned or that I've talked about in the book, and you know, sharing them in a way that hopefully creates a learning opportunity or some self-reflection opportunities, because I do think, like, not just Indigenous young people, but all folks, there's amazing leaders out there. And really what that course, the intention is to help people create their own leadership pathways. So with your own, wherever you're at today in your work or in your student life, how can you be a leader with that, like with where you're sitting right now? Because I think when, you know, you're a part of a community or when you hear a lot of that storytelling, then you feel like, you know, perhaps maybe you want to get involved or you can get involved, you know, if that's what you're looking for.
I like that. Sounds like it'd be really valuable to get that into the school systems and get your book into the school systems too.
I hope so. I've received some like amazing reviews from people, and one person said, "Oh, this should be a part of school curriculum."
Yes.
Yeah. I hope that it would be helpful for a lot of folks. And again, just never wanting it to be like prescriptive, like here, follow me, here and follow the blueprint. It's never meant to be that way. Like I don't think that would work. But, you know, if we continuously create these conversations in these different spaces, then, you know, maybe we really can start to share some of that and, you know, see what that could look like. But I do want to talk about, I think the most important part of all of this work is realizing how much of my children have impacted my work. And so in the video that we created for the brand launch, so my son is a part of it, and he's 14 now. I have a 14 and a 7-year-old.
Is he the one working out with you?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And being a parent it has been such an incredible learning experience in this. I think often there are narratives that, at least certainly when I was growing up, that you have to, once you have responsibilities, you can't do all of the other things. But I want to challenge that one a little bit. And I feel like maybe the world is shifting away from that, because I certainly, like I've shared already, I wouldn't work nearly as hard if I didn't have my children. But I'm realizing the value of bringing them along through this process and talking about the challenges of leadership, the wins of growing or developing a business, and all of the unknowns. Like having those conversations, particularly with my 14-year-old, it has been, it's incredible to be able to share that process with your family. I was talking with someone a while back, actually, when we were working on the brand launch video, and just about how, my son, he's quite the inspiration. And so by now he has, he's created a bit of a reputation for himself as a basketball player, as an athlete. And, he plays in a few different spaces in the Indigenous basketball community, in high school, BC school sports, and then also in travel. So he plays travel basketball as well. So in the
that was Bounce?
Yeah.
Bounce is great.
They had a great year.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
He's really had, so it's been a very great couple of years for him. And he's made a name for himself as a basketball player and athlete. But so in the last couple of years,
Up to him.
he started, his family actually lives close to UNBC, his other family. And so he'll get up sometimes at 4 a.m. and he'll walk to the gym to get shots up before school starts.
Okay, he's got the discipline.
Or he'll be in the gym in our garage gym at 7 o'clock at night saying, okay, I'm just going to do a quick workout before I get ready for bed.
That's what it takes.
I couldn't believe the level of reflection and awareness that he has in that process. And he, maybe not directly with me, but he will talk about the dreams that he has. And I realized, and I talk about this in my own book as well, how necessary, how important it is for people to have those dreams, and
I agree.
I think that there's so much value and magic in preserving that, even for adults. I never want people to, be realistic or to become,
Nice.
More responsible in their choices. Because, and I only say that from experience in, with my own child, but with myself as well. I remember wanting to be a sports doctor with the Knicks, and I remember wanting to go to a school of sports medicine in Australia, kind of when I was in my alt-ed world and I was starting to look for colleges and stuff. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. Of course, I didn't do those things, but I came to this really cool place, and here we are having these conversations because of that. I just think that's pretty exciting.
That is exciting. It seems like you've lived a dream already, and you're still so young. So years from now, I can imagine where you've even another mountaintop and then another mountaintop.
Who knows? Yeah. Who knows in 10 years? I did share, I was doing a talk with a group of young people in the last month or so. And that was actually something I shared with them. There's this brilliant psychologist by the name of Daniel Gilbert who wrote a book. And psychologists will, in their research, will have to kind of come up with a sentence. Humans are the only animals to fill in the blank. And then he creates an idea, or, that's kind of their research. And so his perception was, or his idea was, that humans are the only animals who can imagine, who have the ability to imagine. So we're the only ones who think about the future. And while that's really cool, we can imagine all of these cool things. Sometimes we can kind of gloss over the details of what it, what it could look like or doesn't look like. So when you get there, you maybe are disappointed, or you realize, oh, this is harder than I thought because it wasn't how I imagined it. And so my point in sharing that story was that it actually is rarely how we imagine it.
Yeah, it ends up different. Yeah.
And that's what I think about when I think about that the younger version of me who wanted to go to School of Sports Medicine. Like, I did so many fun things this year in reference to sport. I did my first weightlifting competition after coming back from surgery and injury over the last couple of years.
What'd you injure? Shoulder?
Yeah, I tore my lat tendon, which is a big one, almost completely off.
Ouch.
And it took a year and a couple of surgeries to kind of fix it. And it was a terrible experience.
Yeah, you made it past it.
And we're working on it. Like I think I'm turning a corner. But I was very nervous to do my first. Oh, I still do. Yeah. Nice. Just not as much as I used to, but I still can. So, yeah. I'll call that a win.
Nice.
And then, I helped bring an Indigenous basketball tournament to the community this year as a part of a small community.
We saw that. Jeff and I were researching that.
It was amazing. It was such a great experience for community. I shared with our funders. We did what we set out to do, which was build relationships with a basketball community. So while I look back at that younger version of myself and say, well, maybe I didn't go and study sports medicine, but man, do I have some very strong, very meaningful to me connections to the sport community. I can still do all of the things that I set out to, but it's just not how I imagined it.
Yeah, well, I love it. Well, thank you for coming today.
Yes, thank you so much. This is great.
It's been great for me too. I feel like we could talk about a lot more, but our hour is up, I believe. So for people to buy this brand so they go to your website?
Yes, yeah. So if you want to check out the clothing, if you want to check out the book, you can head to www.skani, that's SKANII.com.
Okay. And we'll tag you in the share and everything.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Okay. Well, Erica.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was so great chatting with you.
That was great. You made my job easy. Thank you.